Close your eyes and imagine this. 40,000 years ago, deep in a cave in what we now call France, a human being picked up a piece of charcoal from a dying fire. Their hands were already stained with ochre, red earth mixed with spit and animal fat. And in that moment, surrounded by absolute darkness broken only by flickering flames, they pressed their palm against the cold limestone wall and created something that had never existed before in the history of our planet. The very first piece of art. But here's what will give you chills. That handprint is still there. After 40,000 years of ice ages, floods, earthquakes, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations, that simple mark endures. And when modern humans discovered it, something impossible happened. When they placed their own hand over that ancient print, it matched perfectly. 5 fingers, same palm size, same distinctly human shape. Across 40,000 years, 2 humans touched. Welcome to Midnight Museum, where we journey through the greatest mystery story ever told. How humans discovered they could capture life itself and make it eternal. I'm your guide through this adventure that spans tens of thousands of years. And tonight, we begin at the very beginning, in the flickering firelight of prehistoric caves, where our ancestors stumbled upon a power that would change everything. What you're about to hear isn't just history. This is the origin story of every painting in every museum, every sketch in every notebook, every masterpiece that's ever moved you to tears. Every work of art you've ever loved traces its lineage back to this moment, to this discovery, to the revolutionary idea that humans could create something that outlasts death itself. And the most beautiful part, the same creative fire that burned in those ancient caves burns in you right now, waiting to be awakened. Let me take you back to that winter evening 40,000 years ago. But this time, let's see it through her eyes. Her name was lost to time, but let's call her Kira. She was 19 years old, with calloused hands from tool-making and eyes that saw patterns everywhere. In the spiral of seashells, in the branching of trees, in the way starlight scattered across water. Her tribe called her the one who sees differently. The caves they sheltered in weren't just refuges from the bitter cold outside. They were theaters where firelight created an ever-changing display of shadows dancing across limestone walls. While others saw random shapes, Kyra saw movement, life, stories waiting to be told. On this particular night, the tribe had successfully hunted a massive bison. The meat would feed them for weeks, but the kill had been dangerous. They'd lost one of their young hunters to the beast's horns. As they sat around the fire, processing both their triumph and their grief, Kira watched the interplay of light and shadow on the wall. And then she saw it. In the dancing shadows, she glimpsed the ghost of the bison they'd killed. Not just its shape, but its essence. The power in its shoulders, the intelligence in its eyes, the fierce dignity even in death. The vision was so vivid it took her breath away. Without thinking, she reached for a piece of charcoal from the fire's edge. Her fingers, already stained with ochre from preparing hides, seemed to know what to do before her mind understood. She approached the wall as if in a trance. The first mark was tentative, just a curved line. But then something extraordinary happened. Her hand seemed to develop a mind of its own, guided by an instinct she didn't know she possessed. The line became the curve of the bison's back. Another stroke captured the power of its shoulders. Her tribe mates fell silent, watching something miraculous unfold. This wasn't just copying. Kira was channeling the very spirit of the animal onto stone. She drew not just what she had seen, but what she had felt. The respect, the fear, the gratitude, the sorrow. All of it flowed through her hand onto the cave wall. When she finally stepped back, exhausted and trembling, everyone understood that something fundamental had just changed. They were no longer just survivors scratching out an existence. They were creators, capable of capturing life itself and making it permanent. But Kira wasn't done. In a moment of pure inspiration, she pressed her ochre-stained palm against the wall next to her masterpiece and blew pigment around it through a hollow reed. When she lifted her hand, there it was, her signature, her declaration. I was here. I created this. I matter. That night, Kira became the world's first artist. But more importantly, she discovered something that would define humanity forever. We are the species that dreams in images and makes those dreams real. Word of Kira's miraculous creation spread like wildfire through the scattered tribes of Ice Age Europe. But here's what's fascinating. Within just a few generations, cave painting didn't just spread randomly. It developed into something far more sophisticated. A secret tradition passed down through bloodlines and apprenticeships. Imagine being chosen as a young child to join this mystical order. The elders would notice something special about you. Perhaps you saw faces in clouds, or you could track animals by reading the subtlest signs, or you had visions during the ritual ceremonies. They would take you aside and whisper the sacred words. You have the gift of sight. Your training would begin in complete darkness. Master artists would teach you to see with your hands, to feel the texture and contours of cave walls until you could navigate them blindfolded. They'd show you how to prepare pigments from secret recipes passed down through generations. How long to heat ochre to achieve the perfect red? Which animal fats mixed best with which minerals? How to create brushes from mammoth hair that would hold just the right amount of paint. But the most crucial part of your training happened in absolute silence. You would spend hours in the deepest parts of caves, learning to enter a trance state where the boundary between yourself and the animal world dissolved. Only when you could truly become the bison, the horse, the mammoth in your mind could you hope to capture their essence on stone. The master artists were like ancient shamans, but their magic was real and lasting. They discovered that certain caves had perfect acoustics. Your voice would echo and reverberate in ways that seemed supernatural. They learned to place their most important paintings in these acoustic sweet spots, creating multimedia experiences that combined visual art with haunting sound effects. And here's something that will amaze you. They developed a system of artistic collaboration that wouldn't be seen again until the Renaissance. Different artists specialized in different elements. One master might be renowned for painting horse heads, another for creating the illusion of movement, a third for their mastery of color blending. They would work together on single compositions, each contributing their expertise to create works of breathtaking complexity. But perhaps most remarkably, they maintained artistic consistency across vast distances and spans of time. A horse painted in a cave in Spain looks remarkably similar to one painted in a cave in France. created by artists who lived hundreds of miles apart and may never have met. They had developed humanity's first artistic tradition, a shared visual language that transcended individual tribes and territories. Now let me take you on a journey to witness the greatest art gallery ever created, hidden beneath the earth for 17,000 years until 4 French teenagers and their dogs stumbled upon it in 1940. Picture yourself crawling through that narrow entrance behind young Marcel Ravedot, your heart pounding as his flashlight beam cuts through the absolute darkness ahead. The air grows cooler, and you can hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. Then suddenly, the tunnel opens into a vast chamber, and Marcel's light sweeps across the walls. What you see defies belief. Animals, hundreds of them, covering every surface of the walls and ceiling like a prehistoric Sistine chapel. But these aren't crude stick figures. These are masterpieces that could hang in any modern gallery. Bison painted with such anatomical precision that veterinarians study them today. Horses that seem to gallop across the stone. Bulls so massive and powerful they dominate entire walls. But as your eyes adjust and you begin to truly see, you realize you're witnessing something far more sophisticated than a simple gallery. This is a carefully orchestrated symphony of art, designed to create a specific emotional and spiritual journey. The entrance chamber greets you with relatively peaceful scenes. Deer drinking from streams, horses grazing calmly. But as you move deeper into the cave system, the art becomes more intense, more spiritual, more mysterious. The famous Hall of Bulls features some of the largest cave paintings ever discovered. Massive aurochs, ancient wild cattle that stretch nearly 20 feet across. These aren't just pictures. They're portals into a world where the boundary between reality and vision disappeared. The artists used every natural feature of the cave to enhance their work. A bulge in the wall becomes a horse's pregnant belly. A crack in the stone becomes the spine of a massive bison. They painted around and over existing formations, making the very walls seem alive with movement. And then there are the mysteries that haunt archaeologists to this day. In one chamber, they found a peculiar scene, a human figure, extremely rare in cave art, lying beside a wounded bison, with what appears to be a bird on a stick nearby. No one knows what this scene represents, but it's painted in a location that required incredible skill and danger to reach. Someone risked their life to paint a story in the most remote part of the cave, as if it were meant for the gods alone. But here's what makes Lascaux truly extraordinary. It wasn't painted all at once. Evidence suggests that artists worked in these caves over a period of several thousand years, with each generation adding to and refining the work of their predecessors. Imagine the continuity of vision required for such a project. Imagine the reverence each new artist must have felt, entering this sacred space to add their voice to an ancient conversation. The cave became a living document of human consciousness, growing and evolving over millennia while maintaining perfect artistic harmony. But hidden among these magnificent animals lies a secret that's only recently begun to reveal itself. A secret that suggests our Ice Age ancestors were far more sophisticated than anyone imagined. Scattered throughout Lascaux and dozens of other caves across Europe are strange geometric symbols. At first glance, they seem random, dots arranged in clusters, parallel lines. abstract shapes that don't immediately represent anything in the natural world. For decades, archaeologists dismissed them as decorative elements, meaningless doodles compared to the magnificent animal paintings. They were completely wrong. A revolutionary discovery in 2016 changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric communication. Researcher Genevieve von Petzinger spent years documenting these symbols across 146 Ice Age caves spanning 20,000 years of human history. What she found was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The same 32 symbols appear again and again across Europe, painted by people separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. A cluster of dots painted in a cave in Spain matches exactly the pattern found in a cave in France, created 15,000 years apart. Lines and chevrons appear in identical configurations from Portugal to Romania. This wasn't random decoration. This was communication. Von Petzinger's research suggests we're looking at humanity's first writing system, a symbolic language that predates formal written scripts by 25,000 years. These symbols might represent the first maps, the first calendars, the first attempt to record and transmit complex information beyond the limits of human memory. But the mystery deepens when you realize where these symbols are placed. They're not scattered randomly around the caves. They appear in specific locations, near certain animals, at cave entrances, in chambers with special acoustic properties. It's as if they're providing context, commentary, or instructions for understanding the painted scenes. Some symbols seem to indicate seasonal information, dots that might represent the passage of time, lines that could indicate migration routes, abstract shapes that might record astronomical observations. Our ancestors weren't just creating art for beauty's sake. They were creating humanity's first information storage system. And here's the most tantalizing possibility of all. If these symbols represent a common language used across Ice Age Europe, it means our scattered hunter-gatherer tribes were far more connected than we ever imagined. They were sharing information, stories, and knowledge across vast distances through a sophisticated communication network that left its traces on cave walls. The implications are staggering. These weren't isolated groups struggling for survival. They were part of an interconnected civilization with shared beliefs, common symbols, and coordinated artistic traditions spanning an entire continent. Of all the mysteries hidden in these ancient galleries, there's one image that never fails to stop me in my tracks. That connects with something so fundamentally human, it brings tears to my eyes every time I see it. Handprints, not just in Europe, but scattered across the globe. In caves in Spain, Argentina, Australia, Borneo, and beyond. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, created by people who lived tens of thousands of years apart, but shared the exact same impulse, the need to say, I was here, I existed, I mattered. That these aren't just random marks. Each handprint tells a story that archaeologists are only beginning to decode. In the Cave of Hands in Argentina, there are over 800 handprints covering the walls, created over a span of 9,000 years. Generation after generation of people return to this sacred site, adding their mark to an ever-growing human testimony. But here's what's remarkable. The handprints aren't just randomly placed. They're arranged in complex patterns, sometimes overlapping to create intricate designs. sometimes clustered around specific rock formations. And they reveal intimate details about the people who made them. Tiny handprints placed high up on walls. Children lifted by adults to add their mark to the gallery. Handprints missing fingers. Evidence of ritual amputation or frostbite from harsh Ice Age winters. Handprints made with different pigments, suggesting different ceremonial purposes or seasonal visits. The technique itself was sophisticated. The artist would place their hand flat against the stone, then take a mouthful of pigment mixed with water and carefully blow it around their hand through a hollow reed or bone tube. When they lifted their hand away, a perfect negative image remained, a ghostly outline that seemed to glow in torchlight. But some handprints reveal an even more intimate process. Instead of blowing pigment around their hands, some artists dip their palms directly in paint and press them to the wall, leaving positive prints. These direct contact handprints feel different somehow, more personal, more immediate, as if the artist is reaching across time to touch you directly. The most moving examples are found in El Castillo cave in Spain, where archaeologists discovered handprints that are over 65,000 years old, possibly made by Neanderthals rather than modern humans. If confirmed, these prints represent our closest evolutionary relatives expressing the same fundamental human need to create, to mark their presence, to participate in something larger than their individual lives. Standing before these handprints in the quiet darkness of ancient caves, visitors often find themselves overwhelmed by an irresistible urge to place their own hands over the ancient prints. And when they do, something magical happens. The prints match perfectly. Same 5 fingers, same palm size, same distinctly human proportions. In that moment of contact, 40,000 years of human history collapses into nothing. You're no longer separated by time, culture, language, or circumstance. You're simply one human connecting with another, sharing the same fundamental desire to create, to express, to leave something beautiful behind. And if you think you understand prehistoric art, prepare to have everything you believe challenged by a discovery so extraordinary that it rewrote the entire history of human creativity. In December 1994, 3 French cavers squeezed through a narrow opening in a cliff face and dropped into a chamber that had been sealed for 20,000 years. What they found inside defied every assumption about prehistoric art and human development. The paintings in Chauvet Cave weren't primitive scratches on walls. They were masterpieces, 36,000-year-old masterpieces that displayed artistic sophistication that wouldn't be seen again until the Renaissance. The moment those first explorers' light swept across the walls, they knew they were seeing something impossible. Lions painted with such psychological intensity that you could see individual personalities in their expressions. Rhinoceros drawn with perfect anatomical accuracy. Horses that seemed to move and breathe in the flickering light. But it wasn't just the technical skill that was breathtaking. It was the artistic vision. The Chauvet artists understood advanced concepts that took other civilizations millennia to develop. They used shading and perspective to create the illusion of 3-dimensional forms on flat surfaces. They overlapped multiple images to create narrative sequences showing animals in motion, essentially inventing animation, 36,000 years before movies were invented. In one stunning panel, they painted a pride of lions moving across the wall in perfect formation, each animal showing a different aspect of feline movement: stalking, pouncing, resting. The composition is so sophisticated that it wouldn't look out of place in a modern wildlife documentary. But perhaps most remarkably, they demonstrated an understanding of the cave's natural acoustics and geology that borders on the supernatural. They placed certain paintings in spots where hand clapping would create echoes that mimic the sounds the depicted animals would make. A painting of horses positioned where the echo sounds like hoofbeats. Bison painted where the acoustic response resembles snorting and stamping. The artists also used the natural mineral flows in the cave. Calcium deposits that created white cascades down the walls as integral parts of their compositions. A horse's mane flows perfectly into a natural white mineral formation, making it appear as if the painting is emerging from the living rock itself. This wasn't just art. It was immersive, environmental design that wouldn't be matched until the most sophisticated modern museum installations. But here's the mystery that keeps archaeologists awake at night. If humans were capable of such artistic mastery 36,000 years ago, what happened to these traditions? Why did such sophisticated techniques seem to disappear from the archaeological record, only to be rediscovered thousands of years later? Some researchers believe we're seeing evidence of an artistic golden age that was lost during the harsh climate changes of the last ice age. Perhaps the knowledge survived in isolated pockets, passed down through secret traditions we haven't yet discovered. Or perhaps artistic mastery was cyclical, rising and falling with the fortunes of different human populations. What we do know is that Charvet forces us to abandon our assumptions about primitive people and recognize that human creativity, like human intelligence, hasn't evolved significantly in the past 40,000 years. The same capacity for artistic genius that produced Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel existed in full flower during the Ice Age. As we delve deeper into these ancient mysteries, we begin to understand that these caves weren't just art galleries. They were sacred theaters, where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds dissolved completely. The evidence is overwhelming that many of these painted caves served as centers for shamanic rituals, places where specially trained individuals would enter altered states of consciousness to communicate with the spirit world. The art wasn't just decoration for these ceremonies. It was an integral part of the spiritual technology. Consider the cave of Trois in France, where archaeologists discovered one of the most enigmatic figures in all of prehistoric art: the sorcerer. This mysterious figure combines human and animal features. Human legs and torso, but with the antlers of a stag, the eyes of an owl, the beard of a bison, and the tail of a horse. The figure appears to be dancing or performing some kind of ritual, positioned high on the cave wall where it overlooks hundreds of painted animals. Most researchers believe the sorcerer represents a shaman in ceremonial dress, captured at the moment of spiritual transformation when he becomes one with the animal spirits. The positioning suggests he's the master of the animals, the intermediary between the human and animal worlds. But the shamanic connections go much deeper. Many caves show evidence of being designed as sensory deprivation chambers. Deep underground, completely dark except for flickering torches, filled with the intoxicating smoke of burning animal fat and mysterious plant materials. These caves would have been perfect environments for inducing altered states of consciousness. The acoustics weren't accidental either. Certain chambers were clearly designed to amplify and distort sound in ways that would seem supernatural to prehistoric people. Imagine the effect of drums echoing through these chambers, human voices becoming otherworldly, the very walls seeming to speak with the voices of spirits and ancestors. The placement of paintings supports this theory. The most powerful and mysterious images are often found in the most remote parts of caves, in chambers that required dangerous journeys through narrow passages to reach. These weren't public galleries. They were holy of holies, accessible only to the most initiated members of the spiritual community. Recent research has even identified specific locations where shamans might have experienced visions. Certain spots in painted caves contain higher levels of carbon dioxide due to poor air circulation. Spending time in these areas would cause mild hallucinations and altered states of consciousness. Natural chemistry combining with spiritual practice to create transcendent experiences. The art itself shows clear signs of visionary inspiration. Many animals are painted in impossible positions or combinations that suggest they were seen in dreams or visions rather than direct observation. Floating creatures, animals with multiple heads, impossible color combinations, all hallmarks of art created under the influence of altered consciousness. This shamanic tradition helps explain the incredible consistency of cave art across vast distances and time periods. If the images were being received through spiritual visions rather than direct observation, they would naturally show similarities regardless of where they were painted. The artists weren't just copying what they saw. They were channeling what they experienced in the spirit world. Now let me share with you some discoveries that are revolutionizing our understanding of these ancient artists and revealing just how sophisticated their knowledge really was. Modern scientific analysis has revealed that Ice Age cave painters possessed chemical and materials knowledge that rivals modern understanding. They didn't just randomly mix pigments. They were master chemists who understood complex reactions and processes. Take the red ochre found in Lascaux. When scientists analyzed the pigments, they discovered that the artists had developed a sophisticated understanding of how heat treatment affects mineral composition. They knew exactly how long to heat ochre at specific temperatures to achieve different shades, from bright yellow to deep red to purple brown. Different chambers in the cave used ochre heated to different temperatures, suggesting that color choice was deliberate and meaningful. The black pigments tell an even more remarkable story. Rather than simply using charcoal, many cave artists used manganese oxide, a mineral that produces much more durable and intense blacks. But manganese oxide doesn't occur naturally near most cave sites. The artists were traveling hundreds of miles to specific geological formations to obtain this superior material. Even more impressively, they developed complex binders to make their pigments adhere to cave walls and last for millennia. They experimented with everything from animal blood to plant saps to calcium-rich cave formations, creating paint formulations that are more durable than many modern alternatives. The tools they created show equal sophistication. Recent discoveries have uncovered prehistoric palettes, flat stones with multiple color areas where artists mixed their pigments, brushes made from mammoth hair, carefully shaped and bound to handles, hollow bones modified into spray tools for creating those perfect handprint outlines. But perhaps most remarkably, they understood optics and human vision in ways that wouldn't be formally described until thousands of years later. Many cave paintings are positioned to take advantage of the way torchlight creates the illusion of movement. Flickering flames would make painted animals appear to run, jump, and breathe. The artists also understood how the human eye processes visual information in low light conditions. They knew that peripheral vision is more sensitive to movement than direct vision, so they positioned many animals where they could only be seen indirectly, creating an almost supernatural experience of glimpsing creatures that seemed to vanish when looked at directly. Recent experiments using period-appropriate torches and lighting conditions have revealed that many cave paintings are essentially prehistoric cinema. Carefully choreographed sequences that only reveal their full narrative impact when viewed with moving light sources. This wasn't primitive art created by primitive people. This was sophisticated multimedia installation work created by artists who understood advanced concepts about human psychology, optics, chemistry, and acoustics. As more evidence accumulates, some researchers are beginning to propose something that would have been unthinkable just decades ago: that Ice Age Europe supported a sophisticated civilization that we're only beginning to understand. Consider the evidence. Identical symbolic systems across thousands of miles and thousands of years. Artistic techniques that demonstrate advanced understanding of chemistry, optics, and human psychology. Complex trade networks that moved rare materials across continents. Coordinated artistic projects that span generations. This doesn't match our traditional image of scattered hunter-gatherer tribes struggling for survival. Dr. Genevieve von Petzinger's research on Ice Age symbols suggests that Europe during the Upper Paleolithic period had a level of cultural unity and sophistication that approaches what we normally associate with later civilizations. The symbolic consistency across such vast distances implies not just trade networks, but shared educational systems, common belief structures, and coordinated cultural development. Recent archaeological discoveries support this theory. In 2008, researchers in Germany discovered the Hohlfels flute, a 43,000-year-old musical instrument carved from mammoth ivory with mathematical precision. The spacing of the finger holes demonstrates understanding of musical scales and harmonic relationships that suggest formal musical education. The Venus figurines found across Europe tell a similar story. These small sculptures of female figures, carved from ivory, stone, and ceramics, show remarkable consistency in style and proportions despite being created over a span of 20,000 years across dozens of different locations. This suggests shared artistic traditions and possibly shared religious or cultural beliefs about femininity and fertility. Even more intriguingly, recent analysis of Ice Age sites has revealed evidence of specialized craftspeople. Different caves show clear evidence of artists who specialized in specific animals or techniques. This level of specialization is typically associated with complex societies that can support non-food producing specialists. The astronomical knowledge encoded in some cave paintings is particularly compelling. Several sites contain arrangements of dots and symbols that correspond to lunar cycles, seasonal changes, and star positions. The Lascaux Cave contains what may be one of humanity's first star maps, with animals positioned to match constellation patterns visible during the Ice Age. This suggests that Ice Age humans possessed sophisticated observational skills, mathematical knowledge, and long-term record-keeping abilities that allowed them to track celestial events across generations. Some researchers now propose that what we call the Neolithic Revolution, the development of agriculture and permanent settlements, wasn't the beginning of human civilization, but rather its reconstruction after a catastrophic collapse during the Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions about 12,000 years ago. If this theory is correct, then the cave paintings aren't the first flowering of human creativity. They're the last remnants of a sophisticated, Ice Age civilization that was lost to climate catastrophe and is only now being rediscovered. But beyond all the scientific analysis and archaeological theories, there's something profoundly moving about these ancient artworks that speaks to the very essence of what makes us human. These caves are humanity's first time capsules, filled with messages that were deliberately designed to last forever. The artists didn't choose shallow overhangs or exposed rock faces for their galleries. They went deep underground, into the most protected environments they could find, and used the most durable materials available. They were painting for eternity. Think about what this means. These artists knew they would die, knew their children would die, knew their entire tribes might vanish from the earth, that they believed that their art would survive, would speak to humans they would never meet, would carry their stories and visions across incomprehensible spans of time. And they were right. Every time someone enters these caves today, those ancient artists achieve a kind of immortality. Their vision lives again in modern eyes. Their creativity sparks new inspiration. Their messages find new recipients across a gap of 40,000 years. But what are those messages? What were they trying to tell us? At the most basic level, every painting says, "I was here. My life had meaning. I saw beauty in the world and I captured it so you could see it too." These are declarations of human dignity, proof that our ancestors possessed the same capacity for wonder, creativity, and transcendence that defines us today. The handprints are perhaps the most direct messages of all. When you see a 40,000-year-old handprint and instinctively want to place your own hand over it, you're responding to the most fundamental human impulse, the need for connection across time and space. But the animal paintings carry deeper messages about humanity's relationship with the natural world. These artists lived in daily contact with the animals they painted. They hunted them, feared them, respected them, and clearly saw them as spiritual equals deserving of artistic immortalization. The care and accuracy with which they portrayed each species suggests a level of observation and respect that we've largely lost in our modern world. These paintings are love letters to the natural world, celebrations of the beauty and power of creatures that shared their landscape. Many of the cave paintings also seem to be educational tools, detailed anatomical studies that would have helped train young hunters, star maps that preserved astronomical knowledge, symbolic systems that recorded important information about migration patterns, seasonal changes, and resource locations. These caves weren't just art galleries. They were libraries, schools, and sacred spaces all in one. They represent humanity's first attempt to preserve and transmit knowledge beyond the limits of individual memory and lifetime. Today, these painted caves have become pilgrimage sites for modern humans seeking connection with their artistic ancestors. But visiting them requires the same kind of spiritual preparation that the original artists might have understood. Most of the caves are now sealed to protect them from the carbon dioxide and moisture that thousands of visitors would bring. Lascaux has been closed to the public since 1963, after scientists realized that human breath and body heat were causing the paintings to deteriorate. Only a few researchers are allowed inside each year, following strict protocols to preserve these irreplaceable artworks. But for those fortunate enough to enter the real caves, the experience is transformative. Crawling through narrow passages, descending into absolute darkness, then seeing those ancient images appear in your headlamp beam. It's as close to time travel as humans have ever achieved. Many visitors report overwhelming emotional responses. Tears, chills, a sense of profound connection with the past. Some describe feeling the presence of the ancient artists, as if the caves are haunted by the creative spirits who once worked there. The replica caves that have been built for public access try to capture this magic. Lascaux 2, 3, and 4 use advanced technology to recreate the original cave experience, complete with reproductions of the paintings made using authentic pigments and techniques. While not the same as the originals, these replicas allow modern people to experience something approximating what those ancient pilgrims felt when they first entered these sacred spaces. But perhaps the most moving modern encounters with cave art happen in the caves that are still accessible. Places like Font de Gaume in France, where small groups of visitors can still see authentic Ice Age paintings in their original context. The waiting lists are years long, but those who make the journey often describe it as one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. Standing in these chambers, surrounded by 15,000-year-old art, modern visitors often report a profound shift in perspective. The concerns and stresses of contemporary life seem to evaporate in the face of such ancient permanence. The paintings remind us that humans have always struggled, created, dreamed, and sought meaning, and that our current moment is just one small part of an incredibly long and beautiful human story. As we near the end of our journey through these ancient galleries, I want you to understand something crucial. The same creative fire that burned in those Ice Age caves burns in you right now. Every human being carries the genetic and cultural inheritance of those first artists. The same neural pathways that allowed Kira to see the spirit of a bison in dancing shadows allow you to see faces in clouds, to be moved by music, to feel emotion when looking at a sunset. The impulse that drove those ancient hands to press pigment against stone lives in every doodle you've ever drawn, every photo you've taken, every time you've arranged objects on your desk in a pleasing pattern. You are participating in an unbroken chain of human creativity that stretches back 40,000 years. Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand why art is so fundamental to human nature. The same brain regions that process visual art are involved in language, tool use, and abstract thinking. Creating and appreciating art literally makes us more human, more intelligent, more capable of complex thought and emotion. When our Ice Age ancestors began painting in caves, they weren't just decorating walls. They were rewiring human consciousness. They were developing the cognitive abilities that would eventually lead to language, mathematics, science, and every other human achievement. Art wasn't a luxury for our ancestors. It was essential technology for developing human intelligence and building complex societies. The same process continues today. Every time you engage with art, whether as creator or observer, you're participating in the ongoing evolution of human consciousness. That there's something else those ancient artists gave us, something even more precious than individual creativity. They gave us proof that the human spirit is unconquerable. Think about the conditions they lived in. Brutal ice age winters, dangerous predators, constant uncertainty about food and shelter. Life was harsh, short, and filled with struggle. Yet despite all of this, they chose to create beauty. They chose to spend precious time and resources on something that had no immediate survival value. Why? Because they understood something profound about human nature. That we don't just survive, we thrive. We don't just exist, we create meaning. We don't just endure. We transform our experience into something beautiful and eternal. Every cave painting is a victory over despair, a declaration that life is worth celebrating, that beauty matters more than bare survival, that humans are capable of transcending their circumstances through the power of imagination and creation. Before you drift off to sleep tonight, I want to leave you with one final thought about these remarkable artistic ancestors of ours. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Those Ice Age artists who painted in firelight and darkness, never knowing if anyone would see their work, created art that has now been viewed by millions of people. Their images have been reproduced in books, films, and digital media around the world. Their handprints have been touched by visitors from every continent and every walk of life. They achieved the ultimate artistic goal: true immortality through creation. But more than that, they launched humanity on a creative journey that continues to accelerate and amaze. Every painting in every museum traces its lineage back to those first marks on cave walls. Every sculpture, every photograph, every digital artwork, every film, all of it grows from seeds planted in Ice Age darkness by people who dared to believe that beauty was worth preserving. The cave artists gave us more than techniques or inspiration. They gave us permission. Permission to see the world differently. Permission to transform our experiences into something shareable and lasting. Permission to believe that creativity isn't selfish or wasteful, but essential to the human experience. They proved that art isn't something that only special people can create. It's something that lives in every human heart, waiting to be awakened. Those ancient hands that pressed pigment to stone weren't fundamentally different from your hands. Those ancient eyes that saw beauty in firelight and shadow aren't fundamentally different from your eyes. You carry their creative DNA in every cell of your body. You inherit their artistic courage with every breath you take. You continue their story with every creative choice you make, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. But our story doesn't end in those ancient caves. It transforms there. Because those first artists didn't just create beautiful images. They created the template for every artistic revolution that would follow. Consider what they accomplished. They took the ephemeral, visions, dreams, spiritual experiences, and made them permanent. They developed techniques for capturing movement in static images. They learned to use their environment as part of their artistic vision. They created collaborative artworks that spanned generations. They built audiences for their work and designed experiences that would affect viewers emotionally and spiritually. Every one of these innovations would be rediscovered thousands of years later and hailed as groundbreaking. The Renaissance masters who learned to paint movement and emotion. They were following paths first explored in Ice Age caves. The Impressionists who painted the fleeting effects of light. Cave artists understood this 30,000 years earlier. Modern installation artists who create immersive environmental experiences. Cave painters invented the concept. Even our most cutting-edge digital artists are using principles first established in prehistoric caves. The use of multiple overlapping images to create the illusion of animation. The integration of natural acoustics with visual elements. The creation of sacred spaces designed to alter consciousness and create transcendent experiences. The cave artists were humanity's first virtual reality designers, creating alternate worlds that viewers could enter and experience as participants rather than passive observers. And they solved artistic problems that still challenge creators today. How do you capture the essence of a living creature in a static image? How do you create art that will speak to people across vast cultural and temporal differences? How do you transform personal vision into universal communication? They figured out all of this without art schools, without museums to visit for inspiration, without techniques passed down through written manuals. They had only their vision, their materials, and their absolute commitment to the belief that what they were doing mattered. But here's one of the most haunting questions raised by these cave discoveries. If humans were capable of such artistic sophistication 40,000 years ago, why do we see so few examples of comparable art in the archaeological record for the next 30,000 years? This isn't just an academic question. It strikes at the heart of how we understand human development and the nature of civilization itself. Some researchers believe the answer lies in the materials these later cultures chose to use. While cave walls preserve paintings for millennia, art created on wood, animal hides, or organic materials would have vanished long ago. Perhaps humanity never stopped creating sophisticated art. We just stopped painting it in places where it could survive. Archaeological evidence supports this theory. We find increasingly sophisticated tools, jewelry, and decorative objects throughout the period between the cave paintings and the rise of agriculture. Humans were clearly maintaining and developing their aesthetic sensibilities and technical skills. Others propose that the harsh climate changes of the Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions, about 12,000 years ago, may have caused a cultural collapse that wiped out artistic traditions along with the populations that maintained them. Perhaps the knowledge survived only in isolated pockets, waiting for more favorable conditions to flourish again. But there's another, more intriguing possibility. Maybe the artistic traditions never disappeared at all. Maybe they just went underground, literally and figuratively. Indigenous cultures around the world maintain oral traditions that speak of ancient knowledge, sacred places, and artistic techniques passed down through secret societies and shamanic orders. Australian Aboriginal culture includes Dreamtime stories that may encode 65,000 years of continuous cultural transmission. Native American traditions speak of ancient migrations and sacred sites that connect to archaeological evidence from the Ice Age. Perhaps the cave artists' traditions survive not in museums or archaeological sites, but in living cultures that maintain the ancient knowledge through unbroken chains of teaching and practice. This possibility suggests that the magnificent cave art we've discovered might not represent the peak of Ice Age achievement, but rather the tip of an iceberg, the small fraction of a vast, artistic tradition that happened to be preserved in caves, while the rest continued to evolve in forms and places we haven't yet learned to recognize. As researchers continue to study these ancient artworks with ever more sophisticated tools, they're uncovering layers of meaning and intention that suggest these caves were far more than art galleries. They were carefully designed sacred technologies. Recent studies using 3D scanning and computer analysis have revealed that many cave paintings incorporate mathematical relationships and geometric principles that wouldn't be formally described by human cultures for thousands of years. The famous horses of Pacmel Cave in France, for example, are positioned according to golden ratio proportions. The spacing between animals in many caves follows mathematical sequences that create visual harmony and guide the viewer's eye through carefully choreographed journeys around the chambers. But it goes deeper than just aesthetic principles. Some researchers believe the caves were designed as ancient consciousness-altering technologies, using specific combinations of visual, acoustic, and environmental elements to induce altered states of awareness in visitors. The combination of sensory deprivation, complete darkness, except for flickering torches, acoustic manipulation, echoes and reverberations that distort normal hearing, visual stimulation, moving animals that seem alive in torchlight, and possibly even chemical elements, smoke from burning materials, higher carbon dioxide levels in poorly ventilated areas would have created powerful psychoactive experiences. In this context, the art wasn't just decoration for spiritual ceremonies. It was an integral part of technologies designed to facilitate contact with non-ordinary states of consciousness. Modern research into consciousness and psychedelic experiences has identified visual patterns and themes that appear consistently across cultures and time periods when people enter altered states. Many of these patterns, geometric shapes, animal transformations, the dissolution of boundaries between self and environment, appear throughout Ice Age cave art. This suggests that the cave artists weren't just recording what they saw in the physical world, but documenting experiences from expanded states of consciousness. They were mapping inner landscapes as well as outer ones, creating guides to spiritual territories that exist beyond normal waking awareness. The caves become even more remarkable when viewed this way, not just as the world's first art galleries, but as humanity's first temples, designed to facilitate direct spiritual experience and preserve the knowledge gained through those experiences. For decades, archaeologists automatically assumed that cave paintings were created by male hunters, depicting their prey and celebrating their conquests. But recent evidence is overturning this assumption and revealing that women may have been the primary artists in many cave sites. The breakthrough came from studying those mysterious handprints scattered throughout the caves. By measuring the proportions of fingers and palms, researchers can determine the biological sex of the people who made them. What they discovered was revolutionary. In many caves, the majority of handprints were made by women. At Pecmal Cave in France, 32 of the 34 identifiable handprints were made by women. Similar patterns appear in caves across Spain and Argentina. The implications are staggering. The artistic traditions we've been discussing may have been primarily female domains. This makes profound sense when you consider the social structures of Ice Age hunter-gatherer societies. While men were often away on extended hunting expeditions, women would have spent more time at the home base camps, including the cave systems. They would have been the ones most familiar with the intimate geography of these underground spaces. Women would also have been the ones most involved in the spiritual and ceremonial life of the tribe. In many hunter-gatherer societies, women serve as shamans, healers, and keepers of sacred knowledge. The sophisticated understanding of altered states of consciousness, evident in cave art, aligns perfectly with female shamanic traditions. The artistic techniques themselves support this theory. Many of the most sophisticated paintings show evidence of collaborative work, multiple hands contributing different elements to create unified compositions. This collaborative approach is more consistent with female artistic traditions than with the individual male artist model that dominated later patriarchal societies. Even more intriguingly, some of the handprints show clear evidence of pregnancy. The women who created these artworks weren't just individual artists. They were mothers, literally leaving their marks for their children and future generations to discover. This revelation transforms our understanding of Ice Age society. These weren't crude patriarchal cultures where women were relegated to passive roles. These were societies where women held central positions as artists, spiritual leaders, and keepers of cultural knowledge. The cave paintings become even more powerful when viewed as messages from mothers to daughters, artistic traditions passed down through maternal lineages, spiritual technologies developed and maintained by women who understood that their creative work was essential to their community's survival and flourishing. But perhaps the most touching discoveries in these ancient galleries are the traces of children. The smallest handprints, placed impossibly high on walls where they could only have reached with adult help, and the evidence of young apprentices learning the sacred artistic traditions. In many caves, researchers have found handprints that clearly belong to children as young as 2 or 3 years old. But these aren't random marks made by playing children. They're carefully positioned as integral parts of larger compositions, suggesting that even very young children were considered important participants in the artistic and spiritual life of their communities. The placement of these tiny handprints tells beautiful stories of intergenerational cooperation. High up on cave walls, small prints appear next to larger ones, clearly showing adults lifting children so they could add their marks to the gallery. These scenes capture moments of pure human tenderness. Parents helping their children participate in something sacred and eternal. That children weren't just passive participants in cave art creation. They were active apprentices learning sophisticated artistic techniques. In several caves, researchers have found clear evidence of children practicing painting techniques on less visible surfaces. Hesitant lines that gradually become more confident. Color experiments that show young artists learning to mix pigments, and simplified versions of complex animal forms that represent student work. The cave of Rouffignac in France contains what may be the world's first drawing lessons preserved in stone. On a section of wall that would have been perfect height for children, archaeologists found dozens of simple animal outlines, basic shapes that young artists would have used to learn the fundamental forms before graduating to more complex compositions. Even more remarkably, some of these practice areas show clear evidence of adult instruction. Adult handprints placed over children's marks, guiding their placement. Corrections and demonstrations made in adult hands alongside child attempts. These caves weren't just art galleries, they were schools, where artistic knowledge was carefully transmitted from one generation to the next. The involvement of children in cave art creation suggests something profound about Ice Age societies. They understood that artistic training needed to begin early, and that creative expression was considered essential education, not optional entertainment. These ancient children grew up literally surrounded by art, in communities where creativity was valued and nurtured from the earliest ages. Their handprints remind us that artistic expression is as natural to human children as learning to walk or speak, and that societies thrive when they recognize and cultivate this natural creativity. As we reach the end of our journey through humanity's first art galleries, I want you to carry with you the most important truth these caves reveal. The creative fire that burned in those ancient hearts burns just as brightly in yours. Those Ice Age artists who painted by torchlight in sacred caves weren't a different species of human. They were us. Same DNA, same brain structure, same capacity for wonder, creativity, and transcendence. The only difference is time and circumstance. When that first artist, let's call her Kira, pressed her ochre-stained palm against cold limestone 40,000 years ago, she wasn't just making a mark on a wall. She was igniting a flame that would burn through every generation of humans who came after her. That flame illuminated the walls of Egyptian tombs and Greek temples. It blazed through the Renaissance workshops of Florence and the Impressionist studios of Paris. It burns today in art schools and children's bedrooms, in digital studios and street art alleys, anywhere humans feel the irresistible urge to create something beautiful from nothing. Every time you pick up a pencil and sketch, every time you arrange flowers in a vase, every time you choose one color over another, you're adding fuel to that same eternal fire. You're participating in humanity's longest conversation, the ongoing dialogue between human consciousness and the materials of creation. The cave artists gave us more than techniques or inspiration. They gave us proof that creativity isn't optional for human beings. It's essential. They showed us that the urge to create transcends survival, transcends practicality, transcends even individual lifetime. They painted not because they had to, but because they couldn't not paint. They created beauty in darkness because beauty itself is a form of light that can illuminate the deepest caverns of human experience. And here's the most beautiful part. Their conversation with eternity isn't finished. Every time someone discovers a new cave painting, every time a child sees those handprints and instinctively wants to add their own, every time an artist draws inspiration from these ancient images, the Ice Age artists achieve their ultimate goal. They become immortal through their art. Tonight, as you close your eyes and drift towards sleep, Imagine yourself in one of those sacred caves. Feel the cool air, see the dancing shadows, smell the smoke from ancient fires. Place your hand against that limestone wall next to a 40,000-year-old handprint. In that moment of contact across impossible spans of time, you'll understand what those first artists knew in their hearts. We are all connected through the eternal human impulse to create, to express, to leave something beautiful behind. You are part of their story. You carry their legacy. You continue their conversation with infinity every time you choose to create, rather than simply consume, to add beauty to the world rather than just pass through it. The caves were just the beginning. The real gallery is the entire world, and every human being is both artist and artwork, creator and creation, adding their unique voice to humanity's ongoing masterpiece. Sleep well tonight, knowing that you carry within you the same creative spark that illuminated those ancient caves. Dream in the colors of ochre and charcoal. Let your unconscious mind wander through galleries painted in firelight and shadow. But our journey through humanity's artistic awakening has only just begun. Those cave artists lit a flame that would soon spread beyond the hidden depths of limestone caverns. As humans learned to plant crops and build permanent settlements, as they discovered how to work metal and construct massive monuments, that creative fire would blaze into the first great civilizations. In our next episode, we'll emerge from the caves into the blazing sun of ancient Egypt, where art becomes power incarnate, where massive pyramids reach toward the heavens and pharaohs commission artworks designed to last for eternity, where the anonymous cave artists give way to the first named creators in human history, and where art becomes the language through which gods speak to mortals. We'll witness the birth of artistic traditions that would influence every culture that came after, from the perfect mathematical proportions of Greek sculpture to the soaring cathedrals of medieval Europe to the museums and galleries of today. That beneath all of these magnificent civilizations and their countless masterpieces, the same creative heartbeat continues. The pulse first felt in those Ice Age caves, the rhythm of human hands creating beauty from nothing, the eternal conversation between human consciousness and the raw materials of existence. Until we meet again in the golden light of ancient civilizations, remember, you are the inheritor of humanity's greatest treasure, the ability to create meaning, beauty, and connection through the simple act of making marks that matter. Sweet dreams, fellow artist. Your cave walls await.